Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of the ShOUT Show with me, your host, Preacher Moss. Listen, I want to thank everybody from yesterday that came, and man, I mean, you guys showed out yesterday. We really appreciated the conversation and just the sense of community around the I want to say the knowledge sharing of Imam every man was a shocker, man. We had a great show yesterday, and we had people come on, man. I haven't seen in a while, and I really appreciated it. He's a busy man, but I know that you guys are busy. So let me start off by saying thank you for coming and joining this. I want to say online live stream, if you will, as well. If it's your first time, stick around. We might have something for you. And if it's your second time or your third time or you're a regular, we love you and we appreciate you for coming through. Today's topic, man, is something that has been actually on my mind since really around the beginning, if you will, of the COVID outbreak. And it just had so much to do with the ability of being able to protect your family. And I talk about COVID at times in this space where it rendered gender roles, family roles, almost it just rendered them in some regards like wow. I almost want to say man, it was hard to be in that position if you were a father or even if you were a mother because you were dealing with something that was totally foreign. And then we had the whole George Floyd thing, which really threw me in a tailspin because this was yet in some regards another space whereby family was being affected. Framework of family was being affected, and as it's played out, it's been interesting to see with the whole idea of Black Lives Matter. It's gotten away from Black families. Because that is the thing that's missing. And I know, I think the day before yesterday, I was talking about Mr. Brooks down in Atlanta, who was murdered by Atlanta police, and what he talked about in his space about having to go through probation. I I gleaned from it that it was hard for him to be a father that could hold his head up. It was hard for him to be a father that could provide because there were so many hoops and so many hoops he had to jump through, and it's really difficult. And now I find as we are going through yet another space, if you will, with COVID-19, this threats of having to shut down again on this day, which is one day before Father's Day, all around the world. Well, maybe just here in the United States. I'll take that back. But it's the idea of what is going on with fatherhood. The idea of what is going on with fatherhood, because I find myself, even in some regards, at a loss of trying to find out where the tradition went. There are certain things in gender roles, certain things in family designation roles that they just don't change. The value of the father is not like it's not this space where the father is, the head of the household. He's the convener of opinions in the house, and then he lends his opinion. And this part, so well, yeah, he has to lead as a father. But I'm like, what's going on with that? Because even before this particular time, if you will, there was a couple of years ago. I went to a conference, and check out the title. The title was Black Male Toxicity. Uh, that's what it was called. The whole idea of male toxicity, males being toxic, and things like that. And I looked at it like, well, if you're toxic and you're unhealthy, how can you leave the family? I mean, it's a very, very, a very nuanced term to use, but I think it supersedes some of the things that we have to understand, particularly Black fathers. Black fathers have a very, very, very different perspective in terms of how they raise their children. Um, they raise their children to be successful, but they raise their children to live. They raise their children to have existence beyond their existence. They raise their children to understand that you're in a society that doesn't protect you, and thus you will not be safe your entire life. But it also says you can still be successful and count on yourself. Believe in your talents, believe in your skills. And I think that's something that maybe we haven't seen. So I'm gonna show this clip because this was a clip that was shown at the beginning of this conference. This particular session was about male toxicity. Let me give you a setup. This is Denzel Washington speaking to his son in the movie Fences. And I really want everybody to just pay attention to the dialogue because there's a few nuances now. There's a few things in that, gems, if you will, that I want to bring in there. Okay? We'll be right back.
Can I ask you a question?
Hell, you got to ask me, Mr. Stewicki, the one you got the questions for.
How come you ain't never liked me?
Like you? Who the hell said I got to like you? What law is there say I got to like you? Want to stand up in front of my face and ask a damn fool-ass question like that? Talking about liking somebody. Come here, boy, when I talk to you. Straighten up, goddammit. I asked you a question. What law is there say I got to like you?
Huh?
All right, then. Don't you eat every day? Answer me when I talk to you. Don't you eat every day?
Yeah.
Nigga, as long as you in my house, you put a sir on the end of it when you talk to me.
Yes, sir.
You eat every day.
Yes, sir.
Got a roof over your head.
Yes, sir.
Got clothes on your back.
Yes, sir.
Why you think that is?
Because of you?
Hell, I know it's because of me. But why do you think that is?
Because you like me?
Like you. I go out of here every morning. I bust my butt putting up with them crackers every day because I like you. You're about the biggest fool I ever saw. It's my job. It's my responsibility. A man is supposed to take care of his family. You live in my house, fill your belly with my food, put you behind on my bed because you're my son. Because I like you, because it's my duty to take care of you. I owe a responsibility to you. Now let's get this straight right here and now before I go along any further. I ain't got to like you. Mr. Rand don't give me my money come payday because he like me. He give it to me because he owe me. Now I don't give you everything I got to give you. I give you your life. Me and your mama worked that out between us, and liking your black ass wasn't part of the bargain. Now don't you go through life worrying about whether somebody like you or not. You best be making sure they're doing right by you. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
then get the hell out of my face and get on down to that A&P.
This might be the most reliable way for
So,
ordinary.
I've watched this scene a couple times, and let me give a quick shout out, Sister Yasmin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I've watched this scene a couple times, and I've run it through my head in terms of what my childhood was, and my dad was like that. He still is. I don't question whether my pops loves me or not. I know it because he tried to prepare me for what life was going to be out there. And the life that he's preparing me for, honestly, or he prepared me for, is the life that he saw and the life that his grandfather saw. I mean, his father saw. It's an interesting dichotomy because we now find ourselves in spaces whereby fatherhood is bent. Let's call it what it is. It's bent. Even if you just talking about the natural biological processes for being a father being usurped, adoption. I saw a commercial not too long ago where there was a babysitter, and it was a comedy piece, about don't settle for like average or whatever. But the babysitter was there, and the guy turns around and goes, "Well, we're going out for a date or something like that," and he goes, "Don't do something," and the lady goes, "Whatever." She's blowing it off. The subtlety there is that, if you will, the person's going on a date with is another guy. So that space of being fathers is not the biological one. And I think it comes to the point that, man, it's like, when are we going to get back to having this discussion about the nuclear family? Literally, it's like, okay, what happened to all these thousands of years of nuclear family? And then African American tradition is interesting because the whole idea of marriage. We're not even talking about marriage at this point in time. We're just talking about family, a nuclear family. The whole idea of marriage is a pretty novel idea up until the 1880s, where it begins to be recognized that Black people could be married to one another. So what does that tell you? It means that before then, going back to the slave days, it's like they were just mated. It's like it's this whole idea of, literally who's your father, who's your daddy, is a deep, deep psychological, moral, and spiritual question. The idea of lineage, and but my point is, if there's a point to be made, a point is like what's happened to the father? What's happened to the aspect of the father? We're in this whole space. I'm calling it the phase of George Floyd. We're having this outpouring, a very sincere outpouring of disbelief, shock, disgust. People are angry. And we're talking Black Lives Matter, but we're not talking Black family life, which is really something that when the dust settles, we're not even looking at that. Who's going to be that father figure to George Floyd's his daughters and his sons? And I think even more important, every time you see a Black man murdered, you're talking about the idea that life will not go on. When I say life will not go on, not just the physical life, I'm talking about the spiritual, emotional life that binds families. And sometimes I'm looking at what I see on television. It's not a spiritual or moral representation of the goodness of why we have families, why we have fathers. And it looks like sometimes the idea of fatherhood has been kind of mushed over to the side. We talk about the children, but we don't talk about the fathers. We talk about the mothers, don't necessarily talk about the fathers. And I think we need a deeper discussion, a deeper discourse, because I believe this is becoming more and more problematic. This may upset some people. In fact, in yesterday's interview with Imam Zaid, he pointed out when I didn't really talk about Black Lives Matter, but he talked about Black Lives Matter, and he's like, his problem, he's entitled to his opinion. He goes, it's three. He said it's a group of Black queer women that have defined Black Lives Matter, and what it's done is, in regards, it's kind of moved out the space in terms of any type of Black male voice, and there is some truth to that. It's moved out the space of Black male voice, which is okay. I understand it, but if you're a person watching this go forward and you're not hearing that voice, you're not hearing that representation, if you will, and it's not being spoken about clearly. I think it's problematic. I think it's problematic. Just like the whole thing of toxic masculinity speaks to an unhealthiness, if you will. And that unhealthiness, if we're saying, okay, cool, this is toxic masculinity, we're saying that centerpiece, that male piece in fatherhood, all of a sudden has some flaws. Let me give a shout out to my brother. What's going on, Ahmed? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, man. And I think we need to revisit this because I think this is something that's being lost. I think everything with COVID, I think everything with George Floyd and these protests, Black Lives Matter, it's being lost. It's being shushed under the rug. And what I found that the amplification of all these things is, it's growing exponentially, but we're not talking about the core or the backbone of what makes families successful, particularly Black families. We're watching Black men get killed, and we're not connecting them to Black families. And I think that is something that's like borderline psychotic. Like, we can watch George Floyd get choked out, and we're not thinking that somewhere, somehow, he has a family, the empathy, if you will, because there's a rush, if you will, to get justice. That rush to get justice should not usurp the fact that you have a framework or tradition that needs to be valued, and it needs to be amplified whenever you can do it. I was doing a comedy show some years ago, a Father's Day comedy show, and the comedian in front of me got up and basically bash the father that wasn't there. Like bash the father that wasn't there. That was all the jokes, and everybody woo-hawed and laughed. And I remember going up on stage going, man, I think there's a problem with this type of behavior. And I thought the problem with that behavior was the fact that we're laughing at the success, let me back up. We're laughing at the failure of family to be maintained. And people don't understand the scope or the magnitude, particularly from the male point of view, of trying to take care of a family. We don't talk about it. I love the clip from Fences, if you will, because that's an honest assessment. My father, he could be as hard as he wants to. He's still a hard dude. But he told me, I'm a hard dude. I'm going to raise you to be a hard dude because you're going to have hard decisions to make. He said, you're going to protect your family. And I'm not saying that people are soft or anything like that, but we've gotten soft, brothers and sisters. We've gotten soft, brothers and sisters. Some things you just can't tell your kids anymore. And I realized watching that clip, Denzel Washington's character Troy was not out of order. What they refuse to say is that he spoke from a sense of urgency. And when you're a father, from the time you get your child, Ahmed, back me up on this, from the time that you get your child, not even the time your child comes in the world, from the time you find out a child is on the way, what are you going to do? Everything is framed in a sense of urgency in terms of how you are going to protect your family. And here I am at this comedy show watching a guy talk about how his father wasn't there, and that's the mockery. But there's certain circumstances. I had to walk up to him and say, why wasn't your father there? He said, well, he was doing prison. He was in prison. I'm like, okay, well, if you're bold enough to say that, if you will, if you're bold enough to say it and say he wasn't there, you need to say he's in prison. Did you keep up with your father? Did you write to him? I said, did your father try and be in contact with you? Well, yeah. And I said, why did you say that? He said, well, it wasn't funny. Well, this is the thing, man. You can't pick and choose. Let me give a shout out. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for coming on the show. But I'm worried. I'm worried in two regards. I don't know if there's a place now for male leadership in terms of the family unit. Slowly but surely, there's been a chipping away of a foundational understanding of what the father does. The whole idea of gender roles, if you will, has some regards flipped. I had this conversation, and I've had some very what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for a kind word. Major disagreements in the scope of talking about manhood, because how can you talk about fatherhood if you ain't talking about manhood? You know what I mean? You talk about toxic masculinity. That word doesn't mean anything. I'm talking about manhood. Men who were men. My grandfather, man. My father, a man. Anybody that sees me, I want you to know, not just I'm a man, but I'm capable of being a strong father. I'm capable of being a strong leader. And I'm not talking about leading the country. I'm talking about leading the household, because now we have these things going around. And I'll go back to what Imam Zayd said yesterday before it closed out. He said, man, he prayed that we could all be strong leaders, that we uphold our women in our lives, that we uphold them. That right there is not being put out in the general population, because people are not talking about upholding your woman. They're talking about, these things, how much money you make, and how, and I have to say something. How you doing, Sister Wahid? Thank you so much for coming. You tell that husband of mine I'm looking for him. There you go, brother. Thank you, brother. We're trying to correct the issues without upbringing and yeah. I just talked to you about my dad, but I'm going to tell you, my dad will tell you, he'll tell you to your face. He said, I raised my son the best I could. He never says I raised him perfect. He says I raised him the best I could. And I give him credit. Because there's some things that I learned as a man I couldn't see it as a young father, young guy. I learned as a man, I've been able to apply it in my life not only to my family, but I'm talking about the other family and the idea of leading other men young men, being a leader of men in terms of where they were, or maybe they didn't have that the auspices of having a father in the house, and I think they need to reframe this. We didn't have a father in our lives, a father in the house, but they need to reframe it. It's like, but was he active? Because intention is a big thing when you lead a family. The intention is a huge thing when you lead a family. And I think in the Muslim space, it's really interesting because, as well as the whole idea of Black Muslim and anti-Muslim racism, we're talking about anti-father racism that's beginning to emerge. And I mean that we're not talking about issues that build our families anymore. We're talking about so many things outside influences. That's why I know when I did the episode of Muslims in Blackface, I was adamant about literally staking my claim on who you are before you come into my space. And that's a dad thing. That's not a revolutionary thing, a rebel thing. That's a dad thing. That is protect your, hey, listen, yeah, every father tell you, hey, sometimes you want to be as gentle as a lamb. You want to be as gentle as a lamb, but sometimes you got to be the baddest lion on the block. And that's not masculinity, that's intelligence. It's intelligence. When I think back on some of the things my dad said to me, I'm like, man, when I was 13, I was like, that man's crazy. But when I got 33, I was like, the man's a genius. Because he figured out in some way, though it may hurt my feelings at that point in time, he figured out in some way to impress upon me the urgency of the situation, whereby when I got to be a man, I didn't have to look around for information. I was literally locked in. I was like, I could pull this out of my memory and go, that's the way we deal with it. Literally being led by men. And I think also the scope of, and I want to say that it's also men who have families who lead young men who are not a part of their families. I think that's something else we need to talk about. The mentorship and the aspect of family structural relationships that we have in the African American community, particularly because we will raise other people's children. My mother did it. If I have to do it, I'll do it. But we raise a village, and I think sometimes we're not really focused on that. Let me give a shout out to my sister Riri. So I'm not trying to poo-poo anything on Father's Day. In fact, tomorrow we're gonna have a fun Father's Day. I'm gonna pull some stuff out and pull some video out, just fun stuff. But I wanted to make the point because it bothered me, and it sat really, really foul with me at the beginning of February that people began to move away from a traditional understanding and respect of fathers. Now, and it's funny because we have leadership that doesn't remind me that they're good fathers. Like I look at a man do something and I say, it's probably no way in the world he could be an effective father. I look at the president, let's call his name out. I look at the president and I'm like, what example are you leading? Well, what example are you leaving for your kids? And I'm watching him. He has children. And I'm saying, is this the example? And it bothers me because I know a guy at a local school, he's a janitor. And this guy has all the leadership skills, all the understanding, all the patience, all the compassion. I mean, he's an angel, man. And kids love him. They call him Papa. And it's not he's a janitor, he is a leader of men. And here we have a man that's a janitor, and then we have a man that's the leader of the free world. And on any given day, I will take that janitor over the leader of the free world because there's so much about character. And as we begin to wrap up, folks, because I don't do a long show. I know we did a long show yesterday with the man Zayd, but I really want to be in a scenario where I can clearly speak to this. There you go. I'm gonna throw this up from Sister Amanda. Yeah. I think it needs to be said that men have a role in the household. And we can look at, Quranic framework and things like that. But even before I got to the Quran, um, I knew as a young child, one of the first words I was able to say was, "That's my dad." And all I'm saying is we need to get back to the point where we can say, "That's my dad. I respect him. I love him." So listen, this is the show. Come back tomorrow. We're gonna do a Father's Day show. I'm actually gonna be. I'm gonna do some different things tomorrow because I just want to have fun. It's kind of weird that Mother's Day and Father's Day occurred in this whole COVID thing, so it hasn't been, if you will, it hasn't been as like I normally like it, But I want to just do something fun and we just have some smiles tomorrow, because Father's Day was always, well, Mother's Day was always the best holiday between the parents. Let's just call it. We love Mama, and Mama got all the gifts, and Father's Day was always funny because your fathers would always give those funny faces when they got time. Oh, this is a nice gift. No, it wasn't. It wasn't a nice gift at all. But sometimes I gave my dad bad gifts just to see that look on his face, and then I give him the real gift. But I want to say this to all the fathers out there, all the fathers. I appreciate you, and don't let anyone or anything dissuade you from the fact that you're important and you're needed. So with that, I'm going to bounce out. I will see you guys tomorrow, inshallah, here on the SOS. I'm Preacher Mars. Thank you, and I'll see you soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What that means is, I think highly of you.